Hey guys, I'm back with a short beginner lesson today. And when we finish up with the lesson, I also have a quick puzzle to keep you guys busy. So today I wanted to talk about the scholar's mate. Um, Many beginners fall victim to this mating attack. And if you guys caught the Queen's Gambit, Beth Harmon actually loses to this scholar's mate in her first ever game. So scholar's mate starts with e4 by white, and black in turn plays e5, which is a solid opening move for black. Notice that both sides, after these pawn moves, have actually cleared up their queen and bishop to move on the next turn. So white, move number 2, plays bishop to c4. And notice that the bishop is attacking the f7 pawn here for black, which is the weak pawn in the opening. So the f7 pawn and the f2 pawn for white are both considered the weak pawns in the beginning of the game. And that's because the only piece that's defending these pawns is the king. So if you can get a second attacker on this pawn without your opponent retaliating or reinforcing the position, then you're going to win that pawn at the very least. And as we'll see in a little bit, you can actually win a lot more than a pawn here. So white plays bishop c4, and black's going to play bishop c5, kind of mirroring the moves from white here. So white's next move, which makes the scholar's mate, is queen to h5. So you'll notice that at this point, the queen and the bishop are both attacking this f7 pawn. And not only that, but they're also threatening mates. So if black is not really understanding the threat properly, black could reasonably make a move, maybe knight f6 here, not understanding the threat and maybe saying, hey, I want to get this queen out of my way. Well, next move is checkmate in 4 moves. So pretty brutal for black. Another common move that beginners might play here is d6. Maybe they notice that the queen's also attacking this e5 pawn. They want to reinforce it, but they're missing the bigger problem here, which is queen captures on f7 checkmate. So now that we see this checkmating problem, what move should we make here? What can we do in this position? This brings me to another common error that novices make here, which is a very natural looking move, g6. So they can see the checkmating threat here. So they say, hey, you know what? If I play g6, not only am I blocking the queen's vision of this pawn, but I'm also attacking the queen. So I'm accomplishing 2 things in one here. Sounds good, right? Well, there's something that we're missing. And what is that? What we're missing here is that e5 is still undefended. And not only is e5 undefended, and not only is white going to win this central pawn, but this capture comes with check. So after black blocks the check or moves their king out of the way, you can see here what other piece is undefended, thanks to this g6 move. So now white's going to capture the rook, and black's already in a pretty bad position here right off the start of the game. So these are 2 common, move sets in the scholar's mate that black could make that just basically lead to a losing game. So now that we see not to play g6, what is the move that we should play here? What's the correct move? And the correct move, which defends both this pawn on f7 from mate, and also defends the e5 pawn, which is currently undefended, is queen e7, guarding both squares. And at this moment, there's not really much of a threat anymore from white's perspective. So white plays another move here, and now we're free to play g6, shooing this queen away and getting her away from our position here. And the reason we can do that now is because this queen is defending the e5 square. So this queen has to run away. So that's a good defense here after these moves have been made, but I wanted to go back and right back to the beginning and explain why b5, bishop to c5 here actually isn't the strongest move for black to begin with. So if white starts out in this position here, a better move for black would be developing either one of these knights. So if we play knight c6 here, now if white plays the scholar's mate move, which is queen h5, notice that we're already defending this e5 square. We don't really have to worry about defending this. Our next move, our very next move, can just be playing g6, kicking this queen away. So obviously if the queen takes here, well, we just won ourselves a queen. So also looking at these spots here, we're going to count up all the squares this white queen can't go to. So you'll notice that the knight is covering h6, and our own queen here is covering all these squares. So white's queen, now that it's being kicked away, can't go to any of those places. So there's two common moves here for white, and I wanted to talk about them because they're both important moves. So oftentimes white will play queen f3 here. And what we see is the same problem we had before. We have another checkmating threat because this queen, again, is attacking this weak f7 pawn, which is only defended once by our king. So can't lose our focus now. The correct move to play here is knight to f6. So developing the knight, attacking this pawn, and blocking the white queen from getting access to the square. So this is just a good developing move, and at this point, white's attack has basically petered out. There's not much left for white to do to continue this attack at this point, but, you know, let's say white plays some moves. Once we castle the scholar's mate, you know, this potential threat is no longer a problem. But before we castle, we have to remember is that we cannot move this knight from this position, because once we move this knight, well, checkmate is coming next turn. So got to keep this knight here, defending the square until we can reinforce that position. Okay, and going back a few moves. So one possibility for white here, after we kick it away with the pawn, is to go to f3. Another move I see fairly, way too often is queen h3 here. And I think that's because the white players often, they don't want to move their queen to the square because they want to develop their knight to f3. So instead they go all the way back to h3, kind of putting this queen all the way in the corner. And this is a bad move for white, not only because the queen's not in a great square, it's all the way in the corner, but let's see if you can notice a move that you can make here as black that is a double attack that will win some material and really put you in a great position moving forward. That move is pawn of d5. So not only are we attacking the bishop here, but the bigger threat is by moving this pawn, we have opened up an attack on white's queen with our bishop here. So if white's not really paying attention, white might say, oh, free pawn, thank you very much. Not noticing our bishop takes queen on h3. And if white does notice, and white is, smart and sees that, then they're going to have to move their queen out of the way. But at that point, well, then we just take the bishop with our pawn. And, most common move here for white would probably be recapturing the pawn. But I've also seen white players say, oh, look, it's a queen. But that kind of compounds the problem for white, because now you'll notice they have 0 pieces on the board that are developed. And we have 1 material, and we're in a great position for black. So those are just some common moves I wanted to go over with you guys. And the last thing I wanted to talk about here was, instead of playing knight to c6, black here can also play knight f6. And again, attacking the pawn and developing the knight, but also just as importantly, we're covering the h5 square, which is where white wants to be with their queen in this opening. So this knight f6 move just totally neutralizes the scholar's mate opening. So obviously if they play h5 here with their queen, we can just capture it, and we're up a whole queen right in the beginning of the game. So I think that's most of what I wanted to talk about with the Scholar's Mate. Obviously, you guys can take this when you play with white and be aggressive with the Scholar's Mate, but just know that if you do this and your opponent's paying attention and your opponent watches my amazing videos, then you're probably going to be a little bit behind in the opening, because this is not a great opening for white if black makes the right moves. The queen's out early, which is not great. Black can get developing moves early, which force the white queen to move away and basically set them up for a better game in the long run. So hope you guys enjoyed this little lesson here on the Scholar's Mate. And to end the video, I have a puzzle, a quick puzzle that I wanted to show you guys that I thought was pretty clever. So we're playing with black. Black has just played knight to c5. And you'll notice that this knight move is attacking the white queen. And you might say, oh, Dan, but this knight is under attack by the pawn here. Well, if white captures that knight, white's hanging the queen. So you just won the queen for a knight and a rook, but you're going to win even more material here because you've got a bunch of attackers on this pawn. So that would be a pretty big mistake for white there. So instead of capturing the knight, white's going to move their queen back to e2, retreating away from the knight attack. So here in this position, let's see if you guys can find a really good move that at best checkmates white and at worst wins the white queen. So not a bad choice, if you ask me, of two moves. So let's see if you guys can find that. I'll give you a few seconds and then I'll show you the move here. Okay, the move is knight to a4. And this opens up two attacks. One immediate checkmating threat, so points to you if you noticed the checkmating opportunity here. If white's, again, not paying attention, not understanding the threat, next move is queen b2 checkmate. And not only that, but we're also threatening a fork on the next move with our knight. So if white understands the threat here, they see what we're up to. Let's say white plays b3, which eliminates our queen from the checkmating square on b2. Well, then we have knight to c3 check. And this forks the king and the queen. And once this king moves, well, we grab that queen and we're now winning the game, trading our knight for a queen, which is an amazing trade for black. But notice here, even if white plays the best possible move for them, which is retreating this bishop back to c1, defending this square from checkmate, okay? Even if they make that move, we still have this fork. We're still forking this king and this queen, and that's because this pawn cannot capture the knight. This pawn is pinned to its position because of our queen. So just if this pawn were to capture the knight, which is an illegal move, white would be in check. So whatever white does here, if they defend against the checkmate, well, we are, after white moves their king, we're taking the queen. So just a cool puzzle, cool sequence of moves here for black. And that's all I had for you guys today. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson in this little puzzle. And if you did enjoy, then make sure you like and subscribe to my videos. All right, see you guys next time.